Hi, this is Amy Ricker, and this is my case study of a good teacher turns bad. Just a little summary of the case study. The Castview Elementary School is a small elementary school. It's one of 3 in the elementary district, and Mrs. Wilson is a principal there. This is her first administrative position. She taught for 13 years prior to that, and she has a building that consists of 18 classrooms with a counselor, 2 special ed teachers, and 3 aides in the classroom. The first year was pretty easygoing, didn't make any changes, and then some things have started happening with a teacher, Mrs. Horton, and so now we have some concerns. So the problem, what we know about Mrs. Wilson is, like I said, she's been there 13 years, or been teaching for 13 years, and then she went for 4 years of night classes and got her administration certificate. And then took her first job with this school. She was cautious about change the first few years, and so the third year, some issues started arising in the spring with a teacher, Mrs. Horton. She has started implementing a new reading series, and 6 weeks into the new school year, she started getting phone calls and complaints from parents, and so she conferenced with Mrs. Horton. What we need to know about Mrs. Wilson and her school is, what is the negotiated agreement policy regarding evaluations? How are they done for teachers? How often, how many years do they go before they're evaluated again? And when there's concerns with the teachers, what are the steps? What professional development has been offered in the past for teachers? With them adopting a new reading series, was there some training with the new reading series to help them to understand and alleviate any stress over that? And when was Mrs. Horton's last evaluation? Where is she at in that evaluation process? So the problem for Mrs. Wilson is she had that don't rock the boat approach, and that may have hindered her from addressing the issues with Mrs. Horton soon enough. What we know about Mrs. Horton, she's a first grade teacher. She's been a former teacher of the year. She's seasoned, so she's been a good teacher in the past. She started arguing with teachers. She's having a rough time at home. We know her husband's left her with 2 teenage boys. So she's basically become a single mom. She doesn't like the change in the reading series. She's become very verbally abusive with students. She's been late to work. She refuses to meet with parents when they've sent notes or made phone calls. Things that I need to know is, what is her class size? How many kids does she have in it? How many special ed kids does she have in it? Does she have a classroom full of more boys than girls, more girls than boys? Does she have a lot of behavioral issues? What's the makeup of that class? Does she have any supports in that classroom from special education, ESL, student aides, things like that? How many years has she been teaching? And we don't know what those issues at home are, why her husband left. She's got teenage boys. What are the issues that are going on there that she's dealing with at home? And does she have support system outside of the school? Does she have family besides her husband that's left her? Does she have parents, aunts, uncles, sisters, brothers, somebody that can help support her, good friends, to help her through this emotional time that she's obviously having? So the problem we have with Mrs. Horton is she's become very verbally abusive towards her students. She's becoming argumentative and difficult with staff. She refuses to change. And we have a concern with the students' safety and well-being, and we have parents that are complaining because they don't think things are being handled and dealt with. And they've talked to the principal, and now they've also gone to the superintendent, who's called the principal. So our proposed plan of action. First, I would hold a one-on-one meeting with Mrs. Horton, again, just to openly discuss issues. I would hope that my open door policy, we would have a good relationship, that she could maybe confide in me and discuss maybe openly what's actually going on, not just at school, but why she's having maybe such a hard time here at school. Maybe she can confide in me and we can discuss some things and she can get some things off of her chest. During this conference, I would also share with her the parental concerns and the superintendent's concerns and ask her for more information about what she sees going on in her classroom. Maybe then she can tell me, maybe she's got some issues, maybe she's got some kids who have some struggles that she's needing extra help with, and it's causing mounting stress with her. Next, we would problem solve. Mrs. Horton and I would look for ways to work towards a positive classroom environment. What are some steps we can do? What are some things we could change? How can I help support her in those changes? I would set up times to come in over the next few days and weeks to do formal and non-formal observations so that I can collect more data and see what's going on in the classroom, maybe see if I've been missing some things. After those observations that have been completed and I've compiled my information, I would sit down and meet with her again to make a goal, to work on our plan of action to improve her classroom situation. Here's what we're going to work on. Here's what I see. Here's what I've heard you say you're concerned with. Maybe I would find some professional development that might help her in these areas where there are concerns. Maybe find a teacher, not necessarily in our building, because that might be a little more confrontational where she's already having issues, but maybe a teacher in another building where there's other elementary buildings, or maybe a different district even that she could go and shadow and get ideas and maybe just kind of get herself renewed with some new concepts in teaching and things. Set some goals and timelines that have to be met. She has to have evidence to prove that she's making those changes and improvements, and have weekly conferences with Mrs. Wilson to ensure how things are going, and if we need to tweak things, or what are the positive things that we're seeing, or if there still continues to be negative things. Also, during this time, I would meet with parents and all stakeholders to communicate that we are in a process, and kind of how we're working through things, and continue to have that open door with them to work on building those relationships that have been damaged. If no improvements or changes are made, we would hold another conference including the superintendent and look at things like putting her on a leave of absence and the steps that might have to be handled to take and the documentation in case we have to dismiss this teacher. Resolving the issues, if we're in the positive for promoting the success of all students, Mrs. Horton's going to take the appropriate steps to change her behaviors. She's going to rebuild those relationships with her students, parents, and staff. They won't be easy. She's going to have to work hard at it. But with appropriate support from myself and other people, I think she can do those things. She's going to have to hold parent-teacher conferences and hear parents out and build and reassure them that she is building a more positive and safe environment and that she wants to do what's best for her students, because we know that's why she's there. She's a good teacher and she wants to do what's best for her students. Students' attitudes and achievement scores, achievements will improve, and it'll show a more positive environment in the classroom. Julie won't be crying. She'll want to eat. She'll want to come to school. When kids are young like that, if you make school a positive environment for them, they'll want to come. And even if kids, when they're that young, they're resilient and they bounce back. And if she can show them that she loves them and wants to nurture them and make things positive, they'll come about and they'll want to come back to school and they'll start liking her again and having good things to say. If Mrs. Horton does not take the appropriate steps to change her behaviors, she will have to be put on a leave of absence. The superintendent and the Board of Education and myself, we would have to look at the next steps, a possible dismissal from her teaching. We might even look at removing students from her classroom and placing them elsewhere to promote their success, because we don't want to have long-term lasting effects of them not liking school. They're way too young for this. Debriefing the problem. What I was thinking, I think Mrs. Wilson's don't rock the boat personality that she had gotten, or her philosophy, should have been put aside way earlier. I think in the spring, after that spring break, when she started noticing some concerns with Mrs. Horton, I think she should have been having those conversations with her then. Hey, how are things going? I've kind of noticed, is there something I could do? Is there something happening? How could she have started supporting her way back then, instead of just hoping that it would fix itself over the summer? I think conversations needed to go through the summer too. She obviously maybe could have supported her maybe a little bit more and headed things off at the pass. Parents' complaints were founded. They went through the proper process. They started with the teacher ignored it. Then they went to the principal. They didn't feel like things were getting handled by the principal, so then they went to the superintendent and the Board of Education. So I feel like parents did the right steps that they needed to do. Mrs. Horton, she may need a change of pace. Maybe she's been teaching this too long. Maybe she needs to think about getting out of first grade. Not saying getting out of teaching completely, but maybe she just needs a change. Maybe she needs older kids, things like that. My feelings, I'm empathetic for Mrs. Horton in her home situation. That can't be easy. To have two teenage sons. I have two boys myself, and they're not even teenagers yet. I know how, that can be difficult. and becoming a single parent overnight and dealing with the stress of whatever her husband may be throwing at her. I'm concerned for the safety and well-being of her students. If she's yelling and becoming aggressive towards them in verbal ways, she's taking out her frustrations on them. And so I want their safety and concern is my first priority. And I'm frustrated that the issue had not been addressed in the spring again, like I said, when things started happening after that spring break. I want to value what's best for student success and well-being. I want a positive school environment. I want to build relationships with Mrs. Horton. I want to build relationships with those students in those classrooms and parents, and I want us all to build those relationships. And I think the key thing is communication. If you don't have good communication, it's just a snowball effect. So we've got to build that communication. Promoting academic success for every student, things that I would do. Structured and nurturing environment. You have to have a positive environment for kids, make them want to know that let them know that they're loved and they're appreciated and they want to come to school. You have appropriate and district adopted curriculum. We've adopted a new reading series, so everybody needs to be following through, using it, implementing it, so that we're consistent. Positive building culture. We want good attendance by our students and our staff. We want communication with all stakeholders again, and provide appropriate, meaningful professional development. If that's to support Mrs. Horton in things maybe that she's having difficulty with aggression, behaviors, maybe she's got a frustrating situation, maybe she needs more support with the reading curriculum, and maybe she's just afraid of change. Those are all things that we need to provide assistance with. Promote personal well-being for every student. We want to ensure the safety of our students and staff. We want to communicate with everybody and make sure that we're all working together. We want to retain quality staff. We want to implement plans of improvement when needed. So if Mrs. Horton needs something different than other teachers, and that's what we need to do. We need to do what's best for her to be able to nurture those kids. And evaluations of all staff should be ongoing, and it should be consistent. And it needs to be held through walkthroughs, monthly, weekly observations, non-formal, formal, things like that. And enhancing instructional capacity, we need to make sure that we're holding trainings that are meaningful and that are meaningful with our professional development. We don't want to make teachers sit through things that aren't going to help them. We want our professional development to hit what we need. And that's done through looking at our evaluation data, that when we do our walkthroughs and things like that, we need to look at what we're seeing in classrooms and where we need to help our teachers. We need to stay abreast of new teaching techniques in our curriculum that's out there, and we need to build open working relationships among our staff and all stakeholders.